A single peacock feather lies on ancient sun-baked stone. This is the heart of a faith the world has tried to erase. The Yezidi people practice one of humanity's oldest and most secretive religions, yet for centuries outsiders have called them devil worshippers. That label is a profound and dangerous mistake. By the end of this journey, you will understand the true story of a spiritual tradition that has survived against impossible odds. We will uncover origins lost in the mists of Mesopotamia and meet a divine peacock angel who is not what he seems. How does a community keep its soul alive through 74 attempts to destroy it? The truth is, no one can point to a single moment of founding for this faith. Its origins are woven into the very soil of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. To understand the Yezidi religion, we must look back to a time before the great monotheistic faiths took shape, to the spiritual world of the ancient Near East. Scholars and believers alike debate its precise beginnings, but many see profound echoes of religions that flourished here thousands of years ago. There are whispers of connection to the Sumerians, the first great civilization, with their pantheon of gods governing the forces of nature. Some hear resonances with later Babylonian beliefs, or note philosophical parallels with Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian faith that divided the world into forces of light and darkness. This is not to say Yezidism is simply a remnant of those old religions. It is something far more fascinating. It is a living tradition that may have absorbed, transformed, and carried forward spiritual ideas from the very cradle of civilization itself, creating a unique and enduring thread. Even the name Yezidi is a clue to this deep past. Where does it come from? One compelling theory links it to the old Persian word Yazdan, meaning divine being, or to the even older Iranian term Yazada, which translates to angel or worthy of worship. This linguistic thread suggests a concept of divinity focused on angelic intermediaries, a key feature of Yezidi theology, long before the rise of Islam in the 7th century. This is a crucial point of distinction. The Yezidi faith is not a sect or an offshoot of Islam or Christianity. It is its own indigenous system, a separate river flowing from an ancient spring. Its rituals, its cosmology, and its oral traditions point to a development that is entirely distinct. When we speak of roots potentially over 4,000 years old, we are speaking of a spiritual identity that formed alongside the earliest codes of law and the first written epics. It represents a continuous, unbroken thread of belief that has survived empires rising and falling, making its endurance nothing short of miraculous. This ancient foundation sets the stage for the central figure of their faith, a being whose true nature has been tragically misunderstood by the outside world for centuries. At the heart of this ancient faith stands a figure of breathtaking beauty and profound mystery, Tawusi Melek, the Peacock Angel. To see his image is to be captivated, radiant feathers arrayed in a sunburst of color, a symbol of light and splendor. Yet for the Yezidis, this being is far more than a symbol. He is the centerpiece of their entire cosmology and the tragic source of their greatest suffering. The world called him Satan, but that is a story born from a terrible misunderstanding. To comprehend the truth, we must listen to the Yezidi story of creation, a narrative that turns the familiar tale of Adam and Eve completely on its head. In the beginning, the Yezidis believe God first created the divine essence of Tawusi Melek from his own primordial light. This peacock angel was appointed as the chief of 7 holy beings, known as the Heft Sirr, the 7 mysteries. These beings were tasked with governing the cosmos. Then, God created the physical universe, the earth, and finally, humanity in the form of Adam. Here comes the pivotal moment that has been so catastrophically misread. God commanded all of the angels to bow before his new creation, Adam. According to the Yezidi oral tradition, Tawusi Melek refused. But why? His refusal was not an act of pride or defiance. It was, astonishingly, an act of perfect and unwavering obedience. You see, in the Yezidi understanding, God had previously given Tawusi Melek a direct and eternal command to bow before no one but God himself. So when the new order came to bow to Adam, the Peacock Angel was caught in a divine paradox. To bow to Adam would be to disobey God's first and supreme command. His refusal, therefore, was the ultimate testament to his loyalty, choosing to obey the original, unchanging will of the Creator rather than a newer instruction. For this act of steadfast devotion, God made Tawusi Melek the ruler of the world and the link between humanity and the divine. This is why the Peacock Angel is venerated, not as a fallen rebel, but as the most faithful servant, a being of pure light entrusted with the care of the earth. The contrast with the Islamic and Christian story of Iblis or Satan could not be more stark. In those narratives, the angel's refusal is born from arrogance, a belief that he, made of fire, is superior to a human made of clay. That being is cast out and becomes the source of evil. The Yezidi narrative presents a completely different theological universe, one where the supreme angel passes a test of loyalty and is rewarded, not punished. He is not the source of evil, but a benevolent administrator of God's creation. This fundamental difference in the sacred story is what led outsiders, hearing only fragments and seeing the veneration of an angel who refused to bow to Adam, to the horrifically wrong conclusion. They mapped their own story onto the Yezidis and labeled them devil worshippers, a deadly error that has fueled persecution for centuries. So the peacock feather you see in Yezidi art and sacred spaces is not a dark emblem. It is a declaration of this beautiful, misunderstood truth, a symbol of the luminous angel who chose obedience to the one true command. This profound story of loyalty reveals a universe governed by a delicate and intricate hierarchy. To understand how the Yezidis see creation, we must move beyond the idea of a single, directly intervening God. In their theology, the supreme creator, known as Exweder, is a being of such absolute transcendence that he is beyond human comprehension and direct contact. He is the ultimate source, but he administers the cosmos through a beautiful and ordered system of divine emanations. This all began with a single, luminous point. Before time and space as we know it, Yezidi sacred poetry describes the universe originating from a white pearl, the Durer spy. This radiant pearl was not a physical object in our sense, but the primordial essence of all creation, suspended in the void. From this sacred pearl, through the wheel of Exweder, the cosmos unfolded in a burst of divine light, but the Creator did not then manage the world directly. Instead, he entrusted its care to 7 holy beings, the Heft Sirr, which translates to the 7 mysteries. These are not angels in the simple, winged messenger sense. They are powerful divine emanations, each a unique aspect of the Creator's will made manifest to oversee the functioning of reality. They form the very architecture of the spiritual world. Leading this celestial council is, of course, Tawusi Melek, the Peacock Angel. As the first creation from God's light, he is the leader and the direct viceroy of God on earth. The other 6 beings complete this holy heptad. They are Sherksun, Sherksobakar, Nasruddin, Fexruddin, Sesuddin, and Sherkshessen. To the Yezidi people, these are not abstract concepts. They are intimately connected to their social and spiritual life. In fact, the first 3, along with Tawusi Melek, are considered so sacred that their names are rarely spoken aloud in casual conversation, replaced instead by reverential titles. Each of these beings has a role, a sphere of influence within the divine order. They are the intermediaries, the means through which the transcendent God's will flows into the world. For example, Fexruddin is often associated with the moon and is a patron of religious leadership, while Sesuddin is linked to the sun and the concept of divine mercy. This system means that prayer and devotion in Yezidism are often directed through these holy beings, who then intercede with the ultimate Creator. It is a faith of spiritual layers, where the divine is both utterly beyond and intimately close through its manifestations. This emanational theology creates a vast distance from the more direct God and human relationship found in mainstream Islam or Christianity. There is no prophet, no holy book delivered in one moment. Instead, there is a continuous, living connection maintained through these 7 mysteries and the oral traditions that describe them. The universe, then, is not a clockwork set in motion and abandoned. It is a living kingdom, lovingly administered by a council of luminous beings born from a white pearl, with a peacock angel at its head. This complex cosmology is mirrored by an equally intricate social structure here on Earth, one that has bound the Yezidi community together through its long night of persecution. The intricate spiritual hierarchy of the Yezidi faith is reflected in a body of sacred knowledge guarded with immense care. This brings us to the most misunderstood elements of all, the so-called holy books. Outsiders have long spoken of the Yezidi Black Book, a title that immediately conjures dark and sinister associations in the Western mind. The reality is far different, and understanding these texts is key to understanding the religion itself. The Yezidis possess 2 primary sacred texts, both of which are astonishingly brief. The first is the Keterba Silwi, or the Book of Revelation. The second is the Mishefer Resh, which translates to the Black Book. It is crucial to state from the outset that these are not massive volumes like the Bible or the Quran. They are short, poetic compilations, each only a few pages long. Their content is profound, covering the origin of the universe from the White Pearl, the story of Tawusi Melek, divine laws for the community, and beautiful hymn-like prayers. But here is where the true nature of Yezidi tradition reveals itself. For most of their history, these texts were not physical books at all. They were part of a vast and secret oral tradition, memorized and recited by the priestly castes, the sheikhs and purs. The written versions that exist today are believed by scholars to be relatively recent transcriptions, perhaps from the 18th or 19th centuries, created at a time when outside pressure and curiosity made some form of documentation feel necessary. This oral foundation is everything. It means the living faith was not built on a fixed written scripture open to all, but on a transmitted wisdom passed from teacher to student, generation to generation, through sacred recitation. The texts themselves, therefore, are not meant to be read silently by a layperson. They are esoteric documents, their full meaning and proper interpretation reserved for the religious leaders. A typical Yezidi believer would learn their faith through hymns known as quls, through stories, and through the guidance of their spiritual elders, not by studying the Mishefer Resh. This practice of secrecy is not about hiding something evil. It is about preserving something precious and powerful. It treats sacred knowledge as a living flame that must be carried carefully, not a static ink on a page that can be copied and misinterpreted. This very hiddenness, however, fueled the dangerous myths. Missionaries and travelers who managed to see copies of these short texts often focused on superficial details, like the mention of the Peacock Angel, and interpreted them through their own theological lens, missing the deeper oral context entirely. So the Black Book is not a manual of dark rites. It is a concise, poetic summary of cosmic and social order, kept close by a community that has learned, through brutal experience, that the outside world rarely understands its heart. This protective secrecy extends to the very structure of Yezidi society, a unique caste system that has been the bedrock of their survival for 1,000 years. This sacred knowledge is protected by a social structure as intricate as the cosmology it serves. The Yezidi community is organized into a unique caste system, a living framework designed for one primary purpose: to preserve the purity of their religious lineage and the esoteric wisdom it carries. This is not a hierarchy based on wealth or power in the conventional sense, but a spiritual division of labor that has bound the community together for centuries. At the top of this structure are the sheikhs, considered the highest religious caste. They are believed to be the direct descendants of the companions of Sheikh Adi ibn Musafir, the great 12th century mystic who is credited with reforming and revitalizing Yezidism. The sheikhs are the guardians of the deepest theological secrets, the transcribers of the sacred hymns, and the ultimate authorities on religious law. Beneath them are the Purs, another priestly class who serve as personal religious guides to families within the Murid caste. Each Murid family has a hereditary Pur, creating a lifelong bond of spiritual mentorship. The Pur is like a family chaplain, responsible for teaching religious principles, officiating at life cycle ceremonies, and providing counsel. Finally, there is the Murid caste, which comprises the vast majority of the Yezidi people, the laity. They are the farmers, the merchants, the artisans, the backbone of the community. Their role is to support the spiritual classes and to live according to the faith's teachings. Crucially, a Murid cannot choose their Pur or Sheikh. These relationships are inherited, weaving a tight, unbreakable web of obligation and care across generations. Overseeing this entire social and temporal order is the Mir, or Prince, the secular leader of all Yezidis. The Mir is traditionally from the lineage of the Kal Beg family and acts as the final arbiter of disputes and the community's representative to the outside world. This system functions because of one unwavering rule, endogamy. Marriage must occur within one's own caste. A sheikh must marry a sheikh, a pur, a murid a murid. To marry outside one's caste is traditionally seen as a profound transgression, a breaking of the sacred chain of lineage that connects the present back to the holy founders. This practice has been the double-edged sword of Yezidi survival. On one hand, it has created an impregnable social fortress, ensuring that religious knowledge and identity remain within a closed, protected system, uncorrupted by outside influence. It forged an incredible internal cohesion that allowed them to withstand relentless pressure. On the other hand, it has created complex internal social dynamics and, in the modern world, significant challenges as younger generations navigate a globalized society. Yet to see this system merely as restrictive is to miss its spiritual logic. It is a living architecture where every person has a divinely ordained place and purpose, all working in concert to sustain the flame of a faith that sees itself as a precious, fragile trust. This deep internal structure found its ultimate expression in a remote valley, a geographical sanctuary that became the beating heart of the Yezidi world. The heart of this social and spiritual world beats in a remote green valley in northern Iraq. This is Lalish, the Vatican and Mecca of the Yezidi faith combined, a sanctuary so sacred that believers remove their shoes before even stepping onto its holy ground. And at the very center of Lalish lies the tomb of the man who shaped the faith into the form we recognize today, Sheikh Adi ibn Musafir. To understand him is to understand a great paradox. He is the most important figure in Yezidi history, yet he is not its founder. He arrived in the 12th century, a time when the ancient Yezidi beliefs, passed down orally for millennia, were practiced by scattered communities in the mountains. Adi was himself a fascinating figure, a Sufi mystic born in the Bekaa Valley in what is now Lebanon. He was a Muslim ascetic, deeply devoted to God and the path of inner purification. For reasons lost to time, perhaps a divine calling or a search for solitude, he journeyed east, deep into the Kurdish mountains, until he found the secluded valley of Lalish. He did not come to conquer or convert. Instead, he settled among the Yezidi people, and something remarkable happened. He began to integrate his own profound, Sufi-inspired teachings with their ancient indigenous beliefs. Think of it not as one tradition replacing another, but as a deep and respectful fusion. Sheikh Adi brought a framework of organized mysticism, a structured approach to prayer, asceticism, and community life. He emphasized values like humility, charity, and the inner search for God, principles that resonated powerfully with the existing Yezidi worldview. Under his guidance, the scattered threads of tradition were woven into a stronger, more cohesive tapestry. He gave the old faith a new structure, a clearer social order centered around Lalish, and a renewed spiritual vigor. This is why he is called the Great Reformer. He took the ancient pearl of Yezidi belief and set it in a stronger, more beautiful mount, allowing it to shine more brightly and endure. His tomb, a simple, white-domed structure within the Lalish complex, is now the axis of the Yezidi universe. Pilgrims travel there to pray, to tie cloth strips on sacred trees as vows, and to anoint themselves with oil from the holy lamps. The water from the spring of Zemzem, located in the courtyard, is considered to have healing properties. Sheikh Adi's legacy is the ultimate proof of the Yezidi religion's unique character. It is a living tradition that could absorb profound outside influences, like Sufi mysticism, and yet remain unmistakably itself, its core identity intact. This adaptive strength, this ability to synthesize without losing its soul, would be tested beyond all imagining in the centuries to come. The sanctuary of Lalish is a world removed from time. To enter its valley is to step into a living prayer, where every stone and spring pulses with sacred meaning. The air here is cool and carries the scent of damp earth and old stone. From the surrounding green hills, clear water flows perpetually, feeding the two holy springs that are the lifeblood of the sanctuary, Cejna Cemaiya, the White Spring, and Zemzem, whose waters are believed to hold blessings. Rising from the valley floor are the distinctive conical spires, known as quabas. These are not domes in the conventional sense, but graceful, pointed structures sheathed in white plaster, looking almost like stone flames reaching toward the sky. Each quba houses the tomb of a holy figure, a sheikh or a pir, their simplicity speaking of deep reverence. Scattered throughout the groves of ancient oak trees, you will see fluttering patches of white and green, strips of cloth known as karags. These are not decorations, they are the physical prayers of pilgrims, tied to branches as vows or supplications, a silent forest of human hopes whispering in the breeze. At the very heart of it all stands the sanctuary of Sheikh Adi itself, a low, sprawling complex of courtyards, arched doorways, and vaulted chambers built directly into the mountain. There are no grand, ornate facades here. The power of the place comes from its profound antiquity and the weight of centuries of devotion. To walk here, you must remove your shoes, feeling the cool, worn stone beneath your feet, a direct and humble connection to holy ground. Inside the main temple, the light is dim, flickering from dozens of silver and glass lamps that burn with olive oil. This oil, called may, is itself considered sacred. Pilgrims gently anoint their eyelids, foreheads, and the backs of their hands with it, a ritual of receiving blessing and spiritual light, a tangible connection to the divine presence that fills the space. The tomb of Sheikh Adi lies in a simple chamber, draped in green and red cloths, a place of quiet meditation where the reformer's spirit feels palpably close. This pilgrimage, known as Jiyar, is a core duty for every Yezidi who is able, but the most profound gathering happens each autumn during the feast of the assembly, Cejna Cemaiya. For 7 days, the entire spiritual hierarchy and thousands of believers converge on Lalish. It is a time of collective renewal, where the sacred hymns, the kules, are sung through the night, where rituals of baptism in the White Spring are performed, and where the social bonds of the community are powerfully reaffirmed. The act of tying a karag, of anointing with may, of circling the sacred tombs, these are not empty gestures. They are the physical language of a faith that has no single holy book, a way of writing devotion directly onto the landscape and the body. Lalish is more than a site. It is the living, beating heart of Yezidi identity, a fortress of spirit that has sheltered this ancient faith through every storm. And those storms would come with a ferocity that would test this sanctuary and the people who cherished it beyond all human endurance. The true power of Lalish reveals itself in motion during the days when the silent valley swells with the voices of thousands. Every year in early October, a sacred migration begins. From villages across northern Iraq, from diaspora communities in Germany and beyond, tens of thousands of Yezidis make their way to the Holy Valley for Cejna Cemaiya, the Feast of the Assembly. This is not merely a festival, It is the annual resetting of the spiritual clock for the entire community, a week where the abstract principles of faith become a living, breathing, collective experience. The quiet pathways of Lalish transform into rivers of people, all moving with a shared purpose. Families set up tents in the groves, the smell of communal cooking fires fills the air, and the ancient hymns, the Kules, are sung with a fervor that echoes off the valley walls day and night. At the heart of this gathering lies a single, profound ritual centered on the white spring, Cejna Cemaiya. This natural spring, flowing within the sanctuary grounds, is considered a direct conduit of divine blessing. The central moment of the entire feast occurs when the Baba Sheikh, the supreme religious leader of all Yezidis, approaches the spring. He carries with him the most sacred object in their entire tradition, the Sinjar. This is not a book or a statue, but a set of bronze peacock figures, which are actually ancient cult standards. These peacocks are mounted on poles and are so holy they are rarely seen by outsiders, kept veiled and protected. The Baba Sheikh fills a vessel with the pure water from Cejna Cemaiya. Then, with the assembled priesthood and pilgrims looking on, he pours this sacred water over the Sinjar. Think about the symbolism of this act. He is not blessing the peacock standards with the water, rather, he is using the ultimate symbol of their faith, the representation of Tawusi Melek himself, to bless the water. That now sanctified water is then collected and distributed. It will be used to baptize newborn children and adult converts in a ceremony called Mor Kiran, where the child is anointed on the forehead and chest. It will be sprinkled on the crowds and taken home by pilgrims in small bottles to share with those who could not make the journey. This ritual is the cosmic engine of the feast. It represents the renewal of the covenant between the divine and the community. The Peacock Angel, the ruler of the world, blesses the life-giving water, which in turn blesses every member of the community and, by extension, the entire world for the year ahead. It is an act of profound responsibility, a belief that their rituals maintain the balance and well-being of creation itself. Around this solemn core, the feast buzzes with joyful community life. Massive communal meals are prepared and shared, reinforcing the bonds of equality and charity. It is a time for resolving disputes, for arranging marriages within the caste system, and for the spiritual leaders to guide their flocks. The atmosphere is one of intense joy, relief, and unity. For a people whose history is written in persecution, these 7 days in Lalish are a sanctuary in time, a defiant celebration of survival and identity. The water from the white spring, touched by the Sinjar, becomes a liquid thread connecting every Yezidi across the globe back to the luminous heart of their ancient faith. The rituals that flow from this cosmology are woven into the very fabric of daily life, a constant dialogue with the sacred. For a Yezidi, the day is structured around 3 obligatory prayers, each performed while facing the sun. At dawn, noon, and sunset, the believer turns toward that brilliant orb, not to worship the sun itself, but to honor the divine light it represents, the first emanation from the white pearl that illuminates the world Tawusi Melek governs. These prayers are private, personal moments of connection, often accompanied by a kiss to the sacred earth, but one day of the week holds special significance, Wednesday. This is the day dedicated to Tawusi Melek himself. On Wednesdays, work traditionally ceases by noon, and the focus turns to rest, reflection, and visiting family. It is a weekly remembrance of the Peacock Angel's stewardship, a mini-Sabbath that honors the ruler of the world. This reverence for light extends to a deep sacredness of the natural elements. Fire is not just a tool, it is a pure and holy force. You will never see a Yezidi spit into a fire or step over it disrespectfully, for it is a living symbol of divine radiance. Similarly, the earth is treated with profound respect, which is why they kiss the ground during prayer. This intimate relationship with creation is protected by a set of unique taboos, rules that often baffle outsiders but are, in fact, direct lessons carved from history and cosmology. Perhaps the most surprising is the prohibition against eating lettuce. This is not a dietary preference but a memorial. The shape of a lettuce head is said to resemble the turbans of 72 sheikhs who were martyred in a terrible massacre centuries ago. To eat lettuce is, in a symbolic sense, to consume the holy leaders of their community, so it is forbidden as an act of eternal respect. Another powerful taboo is against wearing the color blue. This stems from a specific historical persecutor, a governor known as Blue Fatik, whose soldiers wore blue uniforms during a brutal campaign against the Yezidis. The color became forever associated with oppression and violence, and rejecting it is a lasting act of defiance and mourning. Most profound of all is the absolute prohibition against speaking the word shaitan or Satan. This is not merely a matter of politeness, it is a core theological defense. The Yezidis believe that giving voice to the concept of an evil, opposing deity can actually summon that negative force into the world. Since their entire faith rests on the principle that Tawusi Melek is a being of light and God's loyal viceroy, to even utter the name of the fallen angel from other traditions is to invite the very misunderstanding that has caused them so much suffering. Therefore, they use alternative reverential phrases for the Peacock Angel and simply do not acknowledge the other figure in speech. These taboos are a living language of survival. They are not arbitrary restrictions, but a sacred code that turns daily actions into acts of remembrance, resistance, and theological purity. Every meal without lettuce, every garment without blue, every conversation that avoids a dangerous word, quietly reinforces who they are and what they have endured. This intricate system of practice preserved them, but it also made them a target, setting the stage for a confrontation with an empire that would demand absolute conformity. The sanctuary stones seem to hold the echo of ancient melodies. This is the sound of the faith itself, carried not on pages but in song. The living library of Yezidism is not found in a building, but in the voices and hands of a special class of men, the Kules. These are the musician priests, the human vessels of divine memory. Their role is hereditary, passed down through a handful of families entrusted with this sacred duty for centuries. They are the custodians of the entire oral canon, the walking, singing archives of their people. Their instruments are simple, yet each carries profound symbolic weight. The daf, a large frame drum, represents the circle of creation and the heartbeat of the cosmos. The shibab, a reed flute, echoes the breath of life and the soul's longing. The tambur, a long-necked lute with its strings and frets, symbolizes the order and harmony of the divine realms. When a kul plays, he is not merely performing music, he is reconstructing the architecture of heaven for all to hear. Their repertoire consists of two main forms. The kuls are the most sacred, lengthy poetic hymns that encode the core theology, the story of creation from the white pearl, the duties of the castes, and the laws of the community. The baits are shorter, more lyrical pieces, often telling stories of holy figures, historical events, or expressing devotional love for the divine. To learn this repertoire is a lifelong discipline of memorization, not just of words, but of precise melodies and rhythms passed from father to son. There is no sheet music, no written score. The entire tradition exists in the space between the breath of the flute and the skin of the drum. A kul performance, especially during the feast of the assembly at Lalish, is a transcendent event. As the night deepens, the kuls gather, their voices rising in complex, intertwining harmonies, accompanied by the hypnotic rhythm of the daf and the plaintive cry of the flute. The community sits in a circle, listening not as an audience but as participants in a collective prayer. The hymns recount their origins, celebrate their saints, and lament their martyrs. In this moment, history is not read, it is relived. Theology is not studied, it is felt vibrating in the chest. The music becomes a bridge, connecting the listener directly to the time of Sheikh Adi, to the loyalty of Tawusi Melek, to the very moment of creation. This is why the oral tradition is so fiercely protected. The music is the soul of the faith made audible. If it were written down and frozen, something essential would be lost: the living breath of transmission, the subtle variations that carry emotion and context from one generation to the next. The Tawûs, through their sacred art, do not just preserve the past, they make it a living presence, ensuring that every child who hears these songs inherits a world of meaning that no book could ever fully contain. Hidden away in the innermost sanctuary of Lalish, veiled and guarded, rests the single most sacred object in the Yezidi world, the Sinjar. This is not a relic locked in a glass case for tourists to see. It is a living vessel of divine presence, a bronze peacock figure mounted upon a ceremonial pole, known with utmost reverence as Serer Sinjar, the head of the standard. To lay eyes upon it is a rare and profound privilege, reserved for the most sacred moments in the liturgical year. Its guardians are the Tawûs, the same musician priests who carry the oral hymns, for they are also entrusted with the care and movement of this holy standard. The Sinjar is far more than a symbol. It is understood to be a direct manifestation, a focal point where the essence of Tawûsî Melek touches the physical world. When it is brought forth, it is as if the Peacock Angel himself has descended to walk among his people. This is why its handling is surrounded by rituals of exquisite care and purity. Before any major festival, particularly the Feast of the Assembly, the Sinjar undergoes a solemn ceremony of preparation. The Tawûs, in a state of ritual cleanliness, carefully wash the bronze figure with pure water from the white spring, an act of purification that mirrors the spiritual cleansing of the community. Then they dress it. The Sinjar is adorned with layers of sacred cloth, often green or red silks, and sometimes even jewelry, transforming it from a metal form into a regal, almost living entity. This dressing ritual is an act of profound devotion, treating the standard with the honor one would show to a king or a divine guest. When the Sinjar finally emerges in public, carried aloft by the Tawûs during a procession, the effect on the gathered Yezidis is electric. A wave of intense emotion sweeps through the crowd, many weeping, reaching out to touch the pole or the garments, or simply bowing in awe. In that moment, the abstract theology becomes breathtakingly tangible. The ancient story of the loyal Peacock Angel is no longer a tale from the past. It is a living reality standing before them. The community's unity is visually and spiritually cemented, everyone connected through their shared gaze upon this holy focal point. Its rare appearances are the pinnacle of Yezidi spiritual life, a direct encounter with the divine that reaffirms their identity, their survival, and their sacred covenant. To witness the Sinjar is to understand, in one powerful image, everything the faith has protected through centuries of darkness. This profound reverence for the Sinjar was forged in fire. The Yezidi people carry a calendar of sorrow, a history measured not in years, but in Firman. This word, Firman, means an official decree or edict, but in the Yezidi language it has taken on a far darker, more specific meaning. It refers to a genocidal campaign aimed at their total annihilation, either through forced conversion, slavery, or outright massacre. Their oral tradition speaks of 74 such Firman stretching back across the centuries. This is not a random number, it is a sacred count of survival, each one a scar on the collective soul of the community. The weight of this history shapes everything, from their secluded villages in the mountains to the deepest reasons for their secrecy. To understand the Yezidis is to understand that their faith did not develop in peaceful isolation. It was refined in a relentless crucible of persecution. Long before the world knew the name ISIS, the pattern was tragically familiar under the Ottoman Empire. As the empire solidified its Islamic identity, religious minorities that did not fit neatly into the people of the book category, like Christians and Jews, faced extreme pressure. The Yezidis, with their unique beliefs and refusal to convert, were viewed as heretics and apostates. Ottoman governors and local Kurdish princes launched repeated military campaigns against their strongholds. One of the most devastating occurred in the 19th century, when entire communities were given a brutal choice: convert to Islam or die. Thousands were killed, their villages destroyed, and their women and children taken as slaves. These events are not forgotten history, they are living memory, preserved in the lamentations of the Kul's hymns and encoded in the community's taboos. The prohibition against the color blue, for instance, is a direct memorial to one such Ottoman-era persecutor. Each Firman reinforced the existential lesson that the outside world was a profound and deadly threat, solidifying their inward focus, their strict endogamy, and their protective secrecy as essential strategies for survival. This long night of persecution reached its horrifying climax in the summer of 2014, an event they call the 74th Firman, when the so-called Islamic State swept into the Sinjar region of Iraq. They did not see the Yezidis as fellow human beings. Citing centuries-old fatwas that branded them devil worshippers, ISIS fighters launched a systematic, premeditated campaign of genocide. Men and elderly women were executed in mass graves. Thousands of women and children, some as young as 9, were kidnapped and sold into sexual slavery in a network of markets, their bodies treated as war booty. Boys were forcibly taken to ISIS training camps to be indoctrinated as child soldiers. The world watched in horror as tens of thousands fled up Mount Sinjar, stranded without food or water, facing death by dehydration under the brutal sun. This was not merely violence, it was an attempt to erase an entire people from the earth, body, soul, and memory. The 74th Firman seared itself into global consciousness, but for the Yezidis, it was the latest and most technologically brutal chapter in an ancient story of hatred. Yet even here, the old patterns of resilience held. The sacred sanjak was smuggled to safety, the oral hymns were sung in refugee camps, and when survivors were liberated, one of their first communal acts was a collective baptism with the holy water from Lalish, a ritual of purification and reclaiming identity. The Firman are not just historical events, they are the dark threads woven into the fabric of Yezidi identity. Each one explains why they guard their rituals so closely, why they marry within their community, and why the sanctuary of Lalish is more than a temple, it is a fortress. Their survival through 74 attempts at annihilation is the ultimate testament to the strength of the spiritual world they have built, a world that somehow, against all odds, continues to turn its face toward the light. The mountain itself became a silent witness to an unfolding nightmare. In the pre-dawn hours of August 3, 2014, the forces of the so-called Islamic State launched a coordinated assault on the Sinjar region of northern Iraq. This was the homeland of the Yezidis, a place where their ancient communities had clung to the rugged landscape for centuries. What followed was not a battle, but a meticulously planned genocide, a 74th Firman executed with modern brutality. The Yezidis, unarmed and unprepared for an assault of this scale, watched in terror as the black-clad fighters swept in from the desert. Their first line of defense, the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, had made promises of protection. But as ISIS advanced, the Peshmerga units, outgunned and perhaps under different orders, made a fateful decision. They retreated, abandoning the Yezidi towns and villages without warning. The roads to the Kurdish region were suddenly sealed, trapping hundreds of thousands of civilians with nowhere to run except up the barren, sun-scorched slopes of Mount Sinjar. The mountain, a sacred place in their tradition, became a prison and a potential mass grave. Below, the horror unfolded with systematic cruelty. ISIS fighters, armed with lists and a twisted religious ideology centuries in the making, moved from house to house. Men and older women, those deemed unfit for slavery or conversion, were separated and executed. Thousands were shot, beheaded, or buried alive in mass graves that are still being uncovered today. The younger women and children, girls as young as 9, were rounded up like livestock. They were forced onto buses and trucks, their identification documents destroyed, and transported to slave markets in Mosul and Raqqa. There they were catalogued, sold, and resold, subjected to unimaginable abuse, their bodies treated as spoils of war. Boys were taken to training camps to be indoctrinated as child soldiers. In a matter of days, an entire civilization on that plain was dismantled, its people killed, enslaved, or driven into the sky. On Mount Sinjar, the situation grew increasingly desperate. Over 100,000 people were stranded with no food, no water, and no shelter from the relentless summer sun. Children and the elderly began to die of thirst. The world watched via satellite images a vast exodus of tiny figures trapped on a rocky mountain, with ISIS fighters waiting at the base. The rescue, when it came, was a combination of sheer bravery and international intervention. From Syria, a corridor was finally punched through by Yezidi militia forces and Kurdish fighters from the PYK. They fought their way to the mountain and began evacuating people, often carrying the weakest on their backs down treacherous paths. Simultaneously, prompted by the growing humanitarian catastrophe, the United States and other allies launched airstrikes against ISIS positions and began a massive airlift of food and water, saving countless lives from immediate death. But survival came at an unimaginable cost. The community was shattered, over 5,000 men and boys were murdered, at least 6,700 women and children were kidnapped into slavery. The entire population of the region, nearly 400,000 people, were displaced, their homes looted and destroyed. Today, the trauma is a living entity. While many women and children have been rescued or escaped, over 2,800 remain missing, their fates unknown. Every year, more mass graves are discovered in the Sinjar plain, requiring painstaking forensic work to identify the remains and offer families a fragment of closure. The 74th Firman was not an anomaly in Yezidi history. It was the horrific, logical endpoint of a hatred born from centuries of misunderstanding. It was the ancient label of devil worshipper, weaponized with 21st century tools. Their survival on that mountain, against thirst, against terror, and against a force that sought their utter erasure, stands as one of the most stark testimonies to human resilience. It proved once again that their light, however battered, could not be so easily extinguished. The mountain's ordeal raises a profound spiritual question. How does a faith that venerates a benevolent creator explain such relentless suffering? The Yezidi answer lies in one of their most esoteric and comforting doctrines, the transmigration of the soul. This is not the endless wheel of reincarnation found in Eastern traditions, but a more focused and purposeful cycle. In Yezidi belief, known through their sacred hymns or kules, the soul does not pass into a distant heaven or hell immediately after death. Instead, it may return to this world, reborn within the community to complete a sacred duty left unfinished or to atone for a wrongdoing from a past life. This process is primarily confined to the Yezidi people themselves, a spiritual journey that unfolds within the protected vessel of their own nation. Think of it as a school for the soul, where the classroom is always the Yezidi community and the lessons are the responsibilities of faith. A soul might be reborn to care for a family it neglected, to fulfill a vow to a saint, or to master a religious practice it failed to learn. This belief transforms personal and collective tragedy from a random punishment into a meaningful, if difficult, curriculum for spiritual growth. It offers a framework for understanding why a people might endure 74 Firman. Perhaps they are collectively working through a karmic debt or strengthening their souls through unimaginable trials. This cosmology is intimately connected to another mystical concept, the cause. Every person is believed to have a cause, a spiritual double or guardian angel that exists in a parallel, luminous realm. This is not a separate being, but the higher, purified version of one's own soul. The goal of a righteous life, guided by prayer and the community's laws, is to gradually align one's earthly existence with this radiant double until they eventually merge. The cycles of transmigration, then, are the soul's journey toward this ultimate reunion. If a life is lived poorly, out of sync with the cause, the soul must return to try again. This entire system reinforces the closed, endogamous nature of Yezidi society in a deeply theological way. If souls are cycling only within the community to learn specific lessons and purify themselves, then marrying outside the faith would disrupt this sacred ecology. It would be like removing a student from their designated school in the middle of a crucial lesson, scattering souls away from their path to unity with their cause. So the rules that seem like social restrictions are, from this perspective, spiritual safeguards, ensuring every soul has the correct environment for its education and eventual liberation. In the quiet after a genocide, this belief in return offers a fragile, powerful hope. A mother who lost a child might pray that the child's soul will find its way back to the family. A community shattered by loss can understand itself not as ending, but as enduring across generations, its souls continually returning to rebuild what was destroyed. The light that cannot be extinguished is not just a metaphor, it is the very essence of the soul, cycling through time within the sanctuary of its people, forever striving toward the luminous form of its own cause. The soul's journey toward light is mirrored in the very symbols that adorn a Yezidi home. These are not mere decorations, they are a silent language, a visual theology that maps the entire cosmos onto everyday objects. At the pinnacle of this symbolic world is the sun. In Yezidism, the sun is not worshipped as a deity, but revered as the supreme symbol of God's own ineffable light, the first emanation from the white pearl that gave life to all creation. This is why every Yezidi turns to face the sun during their 3 daily prayers, honoring the source of illumination that allows the world, governed by Tawusi Melek, to be seen and known. The sun represents divine wisdom, truth, and the ultimate source of all energy, its daily arc across the sky, a constant reminder of the Creator's enduring presence and order. Then there is the Peacock Tawûsî Melek made visible. The peacock's breathtaking display holds layers of sacred meaning. Its radiant, many-colored feathers are seen as a mirror of the entire cosmos, each hue representing the diversity and beauty of God's creation. The eye-like patterns on the feathers are sometimes interpreted as the watchful gaze of the divine, seeing all things, but more profoundly, the peacock's ability to transform, from a relatively plain bird into a sudden explosion of color and light, symbolizes the soul's own potential. It represents the moment of spiritual awakening, when the inner light of the faithful soul unfurls in splendor, aligning with its luminous cause. You will find this symbol everywhere, stylized into a circular motif called the Tawûs. This peacock circle is etched into the stone lintels above doorways in Lalish, woven into the fabric of traditional belts, and crafted into delicate silver jewelry worn by women. It is a protective emblem and a declaration of identity, a beautiful shield against the darkness of misunderstanding. Alongside the sun and the peacock, the moon holds a special place. It governs the Yezidi calendar, which is lunar, marking the dates of all feasts and fasts. The moon's gentle, reflective light symbolizes divine mercy, compassion, and the cyclical nature of time and rebirth, echoing the soul's own journey of transmigration. Stars, often depicted in clusters around the peacock or the sun, represent the community of the faithful themselves, each soul a point of light in the firmament of the faith. This celestial symbolism is woven into the very clothing of the spiritual leaders. The most sacred garment is the kirk, a simple white shirt worn by the sheikhs. White, the color of purity and the primordial white pearl, signifies the wearer's direct spiritual lineage back to Sheikh Adi. The kirk is more than a uniform, it is considered a vessel of barakah, or blessing, and is treated with the utmost reverence, often passed down as a holy inheritance within families. To see these symbols gathered is to read their entire story. Look at a traditional Yezidi necklace, a heavy silver piece worn by a woman. You might see a central Tawûs circle, with radiating lines like sunbeams, flanked by crescent moons and stars. This single piece of jewelry is a wearable cosmology. It says, "I live under the light of God, protected by the Peacock Angel, guided by the cycles of the moon, and I am one star among the faithful multitude." The carvings on the sandstone walls in Lalish repeat this language in stone, with solar discs, peacocks, and serpents, which symbolize wisdom and eternity, intertwining in sacred geometry. This visual language ensures that theology is never abstract or distant. It is on their bodies, above their doors, in the temples they touch. Every glance at a peacock pendant, every prayer toward the sunrise, reinforces a universe of meaning, turning daily life into a continuous, conscious communion with a luminous and ordered creation. This deep connection to symbol and cycle is matched by a connection to the earth itself, expressed in rituals that mark the turning of the year and the very food they eat. Buried within the sacred valley of Lalish lies a tomb that tells a different story. It belongs to Fatima Khatan, a female saint venerated by all Yezidis. Her presence in the holiest site hints at a deeper, more complex history of women's roles, one that stretches from ancient reverence to modern, painful transformation. Some scholars, examining old traditions and social structures, suggest the faith may have ancient matrilineal roots, where lineage and perhaps even spiritual authority were traced through the mother's line. Echoes of this can be found in the unique status of the mir's sister, who holds the title Miraza, a position of considerable respect. Yet for centuries, the lived reality for most Yezidi women was defined by a conservative, patriarchal structure designed for survival. The strict rules of endogamy, while protecting religious lineage, placed immense social pressure on women as bearers of pure descent. Codes of modesty were rigorously upheld, and marriages were often arranged within the caste system to strengthen community bonds. A woman's honor was inextricably linked to the family's and the community's honor, a concept that provided protection in a hostile world, but also placed heavy restrictions on personal freedom. This makes the veneration of Fatima Khatan all the more significant. She is not a peripheral figure, but a central saint, her tomb a site of pilgrimage. She represents a thread of feminine spiritual power that the formal structures could never fully erase. Her story, woven into the hymns, speaks of piety and divine favor, offering a model of female sanctity that exists alongside the male-dominated priesthood. This symbolic power, however, rarely translated into public religious authority. The Quls, the transmitters of sacred hymns, are all men. The Baba Sheikh, the supreme religious leader, is a man. The societal framework was clear and rigid, built during centuries of siege mentality, where protecting women from outsiders was equated with protecting the faith itself. Then came the 74th Firman. The genocide perpetrated by ISIS weaponized this very framework, targeting Yezidi women specifically for sexual violence with the goal of destroying the community's purity and soul. The aftermath created an impossible paradox for the ancient social codes. Thousands of women and girls, survivors of brutal enslavement, returned to their communities carrying unimaginable trauma. Traditional views, which so closely linked female honor with communal honor, risked stigmatizing these survivors as somehow spoiled. What happened next has been a profound, painful, and powerful awakening. The survivors themselves, led by breathtakingly courageous voices, refused to be silenced or shamed. Nadia Murad, who endured captivity and escaped, took her testimony to the world, becoming a Nobel Peace Prize laureate and a relentless advocate for justice. She and thousands like her transformed their pain into a global movement, forcing the United Nations to recognize the crimes as genocide. Within the community, these women are performing a quiet revolution. By speaking openly about their experiences, they are challenging the old stigma head-on. They are demanding not just support, but a redefinition of honor, one that resides in resilience and survival, not in the crimes committed against them. Their activism is creating new support networks, pushing for psychological care and advocating for legal accountability. They are, from within, pressuring the religious and tribal leadership to reinterpret traditions with compassion. The presence of Fatima Khatan in Lalish, the ancient female saint, now feels like a precursor to this moment. The spiritual strength she symbolizes is now mirrored in the fierce, worldly strength of the survivors. They are navigating a delicate path, fighting for change while fiercely loving their community and faith. They are not rejecting Yezidi identity, they are fighting to expand it, to ensure that the fortress that protected them for so long can also heal and embrace those who defended it with their very bodies. The story of Yezidi women is no longer one of passive preservation, but of active, courageous reclamation, writing a new chapter of their history from the ashes of the darkest Firman. The true library of this faith is not built of paper and ink, but of breath and memory. For the Yezidis, the most sacred knowledge has always been an oral inheritance, a living stream passed carefully from one generation to the next. This was not a choice born from a lack of writing, but a deliberate and profound strategy for survival. In a world that repeatedly sought to erase them, to convert them by force, the safest place to hide their most precious truths was not in a book that could be burned or confiscated, but within the minds and hearts of their own people. Secrecy became a sacred armor. By keeping the core hymns, the cosmologies, and the laws as an esoteric tradition, shared only within the closed circles of the priestly castes, they ensured that even if their temples were destroyed, the heart of the faith could not be taken from them. It was portable, invisible, and resilient. An outsider could conquer a village, but they could not conquer the memorized hymns sung quietly in a home, or the stories whispered from a parent to a child. This oral tradition created a spiritual fortress that no army could ever breach. The guardians of this living library are the sheikhs and purs, the religious castes entrusted with this monumental task. Their training is a lifelong discipline of the mind. From a young age, a boy destined for this role begins the rigorous process of memorization under the strict guidance of his father or an elder. He does not simply learn words, he absorbs entire worlds. The sacred hymns, the kules and baits, each with their own specific melodies and complex Kurdish dialects, must be learned with flawless precision. There is no room for improvisation or error, for these are considered the direct words of the holy beings, a sonic blueprint of the cosmos itself. The student listens, repeats, and internalizes for years, often committing hundreds of pages worth of poetic text to perfect indelible memory. This is not academic study, it is a spiritual transmission, where the very act of memorization is a form of devotion, weaving the sacred narrative into the fabric of the reciter's own consciousness. The knowledge is not owned, it is carried, a sacred trust that links the present reciter back through an unbroken chain to Sheikh Adi himself. This deep reverence for the oral word explains a quiet controversy that exists within the community regarding the few written manuscripts that do exist, like the Mishefer Resh, the Black Book. For many traditionalists, these physical texts are viewed with a degree of skepticism, even discomfort. They are seen as imperfect snapshots, frozen moments of a living tradition that risks being misunderstood if taken out of its performative and interpretive context. A written page cannot convey the correct melody of a kule, the emotional intonation of the reciter, or the interactive response of the community listening in a sacred circle. More importantly, a book can fall into the wrong hands. It can be read by outsiders without the proper guidance, leading to the very misinterpretations that have caused so much persecution, like the tragic label of devil worship. Therefore, while these manuscripts exist and are respected by some, for the most conservative guardians of the tradition, they are secondary, perhaps even potentially dangerous artifacts. The real authority, the true scripture, remains in the breath of the kule and the collective memory of the castes. This makes Yezidism one of the world's most genuinely esoteric religions. Its core truths are not publicly available for anyone to read and interpret. They are reserved, revealed gradually through a lifetime of participation, mentorship, and ritual performance. You cannot simply pick up a holy book and understand this faith. You must be brought into its living stream. The text of Yezidism is written in the night-long recitations at Lalish, in the teaching of a pur to his murid family, and in the hymns a mother sings to her child. It is a faith that exists in action, in sound, and in the silent spaces between the words where meaning is felt rather than read. In an age of digital archives and instant information, this commitment to oral secrecy stands as a powerful testament to a different kind of wisdom, one that believes some lights are too precious to be left out in the open and must instead be carried carefully and personally through the darkness of time. The sacred hymns now travel on digital streams. Following the genocide of 2014, a great and painful scattering occurred. Over 100,000 Yezidis found refuge far from the mountains of Sinjar and the valley of Lalish, creating one of the most rapidly formed diasporas in the modern world. Today, vibrant communities thrive in unlikely places, from the industrial cities of Germany, which now hosts the largest population outside Iraq, to ancient towns in Armenia and Georgia, and to growing enclaves in the United States and Canada. This global dispersal presents both an unprecedented challenge and a new kind of hope for the survival of the faith. How do you maintain a religion so deeply rooted in a specific landscape when that landscape itself is a memory? The first challenge is practical and profound: distance from Lalish. The annual pilgrimage, the GR, is a core pillar of Yezidi life. For a community now settled in Nebraska or Hesse, a journey back to northern Iraq is often financially impossible and logistically daunting. The physical connection to the White Spring, to the tomb of Sheikh Adi, to the very soil kissed during prayer, is severed. In response, diaspora communities have begun constructing their own temples, often called Lalish, in their new homelands. These are not replicas, but spiritual anchors, sacred spaces where the community can gather for prayer, for the feast of the assembly, and to perform life cycle rituals like baptism. While the water used may come from a local source, it is blessed with the intention of connecting it to the sanctity of Cejna Cemaiya, creating a symbolic bridge across continents. The ancient caste system faces perhaps its greatest test in these new, secular environments. The hereditary bonds between Murid families and their spiritual guides were built for a stable, village-based society. When a family is resettled in a small town in Australia, their may be thousands of miles away in a refugee camp in Kurdistan. Maintaining that intimate, guiding relationship across time zones and borders requires immense effort and modern tools. Video calls now facilitate religious instruction, and digital messages carry counsel, but the deep, personal texture of the bond is strained. The rule of endogamy, marrying within one's own caste, becomes exponentially more difficult when the pool of potential partners within that caste, in a given country, may number only in the dozens. Young people, educated in Western schools and navigating liberal societies, often feel the tension between this ancient law and their own desires for companionship and love. This pressure is reshaping the social fabric in real time, forcing conversations that were unthinkable a generation ago. Language is another frontline in the battle for identity. The sacred hymns, the Kules, are composed in archaic forms of Kurmanji Kurdish. If the younger generation, speaking German or English as their primary tongue, loses fluency in Kurmanji, they risk losing direct access to the poetic heart of their theology. Community schools scramble to offer language classes, and parents strive to speak Kurmanji at home, understanding that this is not just about communication, but about preserving the very vessel of divine revelation. Yet, in a paradox, the digital age that threatens assimilation also provides powerful tools for resistance. Closed social media groups connect Yezidis worldwide, allowing a sheikh in Armenia to answer a theological question from a student in Ontario. YouTube channels archive recordings of Kule performances, creating a global, accessible repository of the oral tradition. Online forums become spaces to discuss how to observe Wednesday rest in a society that operates on a Monday to Friday workweek, or how to explain their faith to curious classmates without invoking dangerous misunderstandings. The diaspora is thus a living laboratory for the future of Yezidism. It is here that the central dilemma is most acute: how to preserve the essence of a faith defined by secrecy and place, while openly integrating into societies that value transparency and mobility. The choices made in apartments in Frankfurt and community centers in Lincoln will ultimately determine whether Yezidism remains a closed, geographically anchored faith, or evolves into a global religion capable of maintaining its core mysteries across the vast distances of the modern world. This adaptive genius is written into the very fabric of their beliefs. To examine Yezidi theology is to trace a map of spiritual crossroads, a testament to a faith that stood at the intersection of empires and absorbed ideas without ever losing its own soul. This process is called syncretism, the blending of different beliefs into a new, coherent whole. For the Yezidis, it was not a matter of borrowing, but of weaving threads from the ancient tapestry of Mesopotamia into a stronger, more resilient cloth. Look first to the possible echoes of Zoroastrianism, the Persian faith that predates Islam by over 1,000 years. Zoroastrianism presents a cosmic struggle between the forces of light and darkness, a dualism personified by a good creator god and an opposing destructive spirit. You can hear a faint, transformed echo of this in the Yezidi reverence for light as divine and their profound taboos against giving voice to a destructive force like Shaitan. Their veneration of fire as a pure, holy element, never to be disrespected, mirrors Zoroastrian practice. The sun, as the supreme symbol of God's light, holds a place of honor in both traditions. Yet, crucially, Yezidism softened the hard dualism. It does not have an eternal, opposing evil deity. Darkness is not a rival power, but an absence of light, a condition to be overcome through purity and the benevolent administration of Tawusi Melek. This is not copying, it is integrating an ancient idea and refining it into something distinct. The influence of Sufi Islam is even more direct and visible, centered on the figure of Sheikh Adi. He was a Sufi mystic, and he brought the Sufi emphasis on inner purification, asceticism, and the direct personal love of God. The Yezidi focus on humility, charity, and the spiritual hierarchy of saints and sheikhs bears the clear imprint of Sufi organizational thought. The very structure of their clergy and the concept of a spiritual guide, or mirror Sufi orders. But again, this was a transformative adoption. Sheikh Adi did not impose Islam. He used its mystical framework to organize and revitalize the pre-existing Yezidi core, creating a unique synthesis where Sufi practices served an entirely non-Islamic theology. Even traces of Christianity found a place within this flexible system. The Yezidi ritual of baptism, more Kirin, using water sanctified by the Sinjar, parallels Christian practice in form but carries a completely different meaning, symbolizing initiation into the community of Tawusi Melek rather than cleansing from original sin. Jesus is revered within their hymns, not as the Son of God, but as a prophet or a holy figure, another radiant emanation of the divine in a long line of such beings. This inclusive view allowed them to respect the prophet of their neighbors while maintaining their own separate path. What emerges from this analysis is not a patchwork of random beliefs, but a brilliant organic synthesis. The Yezidi religion acted like the land of Mesopotamia itself, a fertile delta where the waters of many spiritual traditions flowed together and nourished something new and hardy. It took the dualism of Zoroaster and made it nuanced, adopted the mystical structure of Sufism and filled it with ancient deities, and acknowledged the prophets of others while telling a different sacred story entirely. This syncretic nature is not a sign of being derivative. It is the signature of a faith that is both ancient and incredibly adaptive, a living system that could integrate wisdom from its surroundings to survive and deepen, all while guarding its luminous, secret heart. Time itself bends toward the sacred in the Yezidi world. Their calendar is a living wheel, turning not just by the sun and moon, but by the rhythm of the land and the memory of saints, stitching the community to the cosmos with each passing season. The year begins not in winter's depth, but with the renewal of spring on a day called Sirr, the Red Wednesday, which falls in April. This is their new year, a celebration of life's resurgence. On this day, families gather to dye eggs of vibrant red, symbolizing the dawn of new life and the blood of the martyrs remembered. They bake special bread and visit cemeteries to honor their ancestors, sharing meals among the graves, a powerful act that connects the living and the dead in a cycle of continuity. It is a day of hope and cleansing, where homes are scrubbed clean and people wear new clothes, marking a fresh start under the benevolent gaze of the returning sun. As the year progresses, the heat of summer gives way to a period of solemn introspection. In December, for 3 days, the community observes Rajia Ezi, a sacred fast. This is not a fast of total abstinence from all food and drink, but a restrictive fast where participants consume only a single, simple meal after sunset. The purpose is purification, a spiritual preparation and an act of empathy, a collective turning inward to strengthen faith and discipline. It is a quiet time of reflection that heightens anticipation for the communal celebrations to come. The liturgical wheel turns through other, smaller feasts that dot the year, each a thread in the tapestry. There is Cejna Cemaiya, a feast honoring a mysterious green figure, Al-Qidr, a prophet of immortality known across the Middle East, who in Yezidi tradition is seen as a benevolent spiritual guide associated with water and life. Then there is Cejna Cemaiya, a feast dedicated to the divine essence itself, a day of general thanksgiving and joy. Each of these festivals connects to a story, a natural event, or a holy figure, ensuring that no month passes without a collective reminder of who they are and what they believe. A harvest might be celebrated with gratitude to the divine administrator of the earth, Tawusi Melek, while a saint's day reinforces the chain of spiritual lineage back to Sheikh Adi. All these rhythms build toward the undeniable climax of the Yezidi year, the Cejna Cemaiya, the feast of the assembly in early October. After the December fast and the scattered feasts of the year, this 7-day gathering at Lalish is the ultimate convergence. It is the moment when the sacred geography of the valley and the sacred timeline of the calendar fuse into one overwhelming experience. Here, the rituals we have detailed, the blessing of the Sinjar in the white spring, the all-night hymns of the Kules, the mass baptisms, are performed. This is not just another festival, it is the annual resetting of the entire spiritual and social order. The community, scattered by diaspora or daily life, reassembles physically and spiritually. Disputes are settled, guidance is given by the Baba Sheikh, and the bonds of caste and family are powerfully reaffirmed through shared ritual and shared meals. This cyclical celebration is the engine of identity. By marking time with their own unique stories, the spring redemption of Sirsul, the winter introspection of the fast, the autumn reunion of the assembly, the Yezidis create a world apart. They live within a sacred chronology that is entirely their own, immune to the calendars of the empires and nations that have sought to dominate them. Each festival is an act of collective memory, a way of saying, we are still here. Our story continues to turn with the seasons. The peacock feather, the sun, the moon, they are not just symbols in space, but markers in time, appearing and reappearing in ritual context throughout the year, a constant, gentle reinforcement of a universe where they belong, and where their continued existence is part of the divine, natural order. These persistent myths are not harmless stories. They are weapons of misunderstanding that have fueled real-world violence for generations. We have already dismantled the most dangerous one, the lie of devil worship, by revealing the true story of Tawusi Melek's loyalty. But other fictions cling just as stubbornly to the Yezidi name, each one distorting their unique place in the world. Let us clear the air of these ancient smokescreens, one by one. The second major myth insists the Yezidis are a Gnostic sect or an offshoot of Islam. This is a fundamental error of categorization. Gnostic traditions, broadly speaking, often view the material world as a prison created by a flawed demiurge, from which a secret knowledge or gnosis can liberate the soul. Yezidi theology does not share this bleak view of creation. Their world, administered by the benevolent Peacock Angel, is a sacred trust, not a mistake. Their secret knowledge is not about escaping creation, but about maintaining its balance through ritual and purity. As for being an Islamic offshoot, the historical record and Yezidi belief itself are clear. While the great reformer Sheikh Adi was a Sufi Muslim, he did not convert the Yezidis to Islam. He organized and revitalized a pre-existing, non-Islamic faith. The Yezidis have no Quran, do not recognize Muhammad as a prophet, and do not perform the 5 pillars of Islam. They are, and have always understood themselves to be, a distinct and separate religious tradition with roots far older than the 7th century. To call them a Muslim sect is to ignore their own self-understanding and centuries of persecution precisely for not being Muslim. A third, particularly vivid myth claims the Yezidis believe the world is saved from a black snake imprisoned beneath the stones of Lalish. This tale is a classic example of an outsider's fragment being woven into a fantastical whole. It likely originates from a misunderstanding of Yezidi iconography and oral hymns. The serpent is indeed a symbol present in their sacred art, carved into the walls at Lalish, but in their context, the snake is not a monstrous evil. It is a symbol of wisdom, eternity, and the cyclical nature of life. Much like in many other ancient cultures, there is a sacred black snake, Shershams, mentioned in some hymns as a protective figure. The notion that it is a cosmic threat trapped under the temple is an external invention, a dramatic story imposed on a nuanced symbol, turning a guardian into a prisoner and a site of wisdom into a cage for chaos. Finally, we must address a misconception with profound political and social implications, the idea that the Yezidis are an ethnic group. They are not. Ethnically, they are Kurds. They speak Kurmanji Kurdish, share Kurdish cultural and tribal lineages, and originate from the same historic Kurdistan regions as their Muslim Kurdish neighbors. Their identity is solely religious. A Yezidi is a Kurd who follows the Yezidi faith. This distinction is crucial. It explains why they faced persecution not just from distant empires, but often from their own ethnic kin who viewed their religion as heresy. It also clarifies the complex dynamics of their survival, living among a majority Kurdish population while maintaining a separate, closed religious community. To call them a separate ethnicity is to misunderstand the very nature of their identity, which is a faith carried within an ethnic nation, not a nation defined by a faith. Each of these myths, from the Gnostic label to the trapped snake, serves to exoticize, distort, and ultimately separate the Yezidis from their own truth. They become characters in someone else's story, rather than the authors of their own. Replacing fiction with fact is not just an academic exercise. It is an act of respect for a people who have defended their reality against 74 attempts to erase it. Their true story is remarkable enough, without the need for invented monsters under the mountain. The future of this ancient faith now hangs in a delicate and painful balance. The 74th Firman did not end with the liberation of Sinjar. It left behind a shattered landscape, both physical and spiritual. Over half a decade later, the Yezidi homeland remains in a state of fragile limbo. The towns and villages on the Sinjar plain are still scarred by mass graves and the rubble of destroyed homes. The political situation is a tangled web of competing forces, with the Iraqi government, the Kurdistan regional government, and various militias all vying for influence, leaving the Yezidis themselves feeling like pawns on their own land. Many survivors, especially those who endured captivity, face profound psychological trauma with limited access to specialized care. The existential question is stark. Can a people whose identity is so deeply tied to a specific mountain and valley rebuild their life there, when that place is now synonymous with unspeakable horror? For many, return feels impossible without genuine security, justice, and a real political voice, none of which have been fully realized. This ongoing instability in their geographic heart is the single greatest threat to the faith's continuity in its ancestral home. Simultaneously, internal challenges are surfacing with new urgency, pressed upon by the realities of diaspora and the aftermath of genocide. The caste system, that ancient social fortress, is facing its most serious internal debate in centuries. Younger Yezidis, particularly those born or raised in Europe and North America, are asking difficult questions. In a modern, individualistic society, can a system of hereditary spiritual roles and marriage restrictions survive? They grapple with the desire to honor their parents' traditions while also seeking love and partnership based on personal connection, not just caste lineage. This is not a rejection of faith, but a search for its essence beyond social structure. The tragedy of 2014 also forced a painful re-examination of women's roles. The survivors of sexual violence, by their very public defiance and demand for justice, have irrevocably challenged old notions of honor and purity. Their courage is pushing the entire community toward a more compassionate and inclusive understanding of what it means to be Yezidi, one where a woman's worth is defined by her strength and resilience, not by archaic codes. These conversations create a palpable tension between orthodoxy, which sees the old ways as the only bulwark against extinction, and reform, which argues that adaptation is necessary for survival in a new world. Yet amidst these profound challenges, there are powerful and undeniable signs of hope. The genocide, for all its horror, brought the Yezidi story to a global audience. For the first time, the world learned their name not as mysterious devil worshippers, but as victims of a historic injustice. This awareness has translated into tangible support, from humanitarian aid to legal advocacy at the International Criminal Court. Nadia Murad's Nobel Prize was not just an individual honor, it was a global recognition of the Yezidi people's suffering and dignity. Within the community itself, a fierce determination burns, especially among the youth. In diaspora communities, you find teenagers who have never seen Lalish running language classes to teach Kurmanji to their younger siblings. University students are writing theses on Yezidi theology, using academic tools to document and analyze their own heritage. Social media is filled with pages dedicated to sharing the melodies of the Kules and explaining the meaning of symbols like the Tawus. Back in Iraq, young activists are rebuilding community centers, documenting oral histories from the elderly, and advocating for their rights with a political sophistication born of necessity. They are leveraging the very interconnected world that threatens assimilation as a tool for preservation. So we return to the central, haunting question: can this ancient, secretive faith survive in an open, interconnected, and often hostile world? The answer is not certain, but it is being written every day in 1,000 small acts of defiance and love. It is written when a mother in a German apartment teaches her child a hymn about the white pearl. It is written when a programmer in Toronto designs a digital archive of sacred music. It is written when a young woman in a rebuilt Sinjar village opens a small business, reclaiming her homeland's economy. The genius of Yezidism has always been its adaptive resilience, its ability to absorb and transform while holding fast to its luminous core. The faith survived by being a fortress, but the future may depend on it also becoming a bridge, finding ways to maintain its sacred mysteries while engaging with a global community that now, finally, knows its name. The peacock feather, once hidden, is now seen by the world. The challenge is to ensure that its true meaning, a story of loyalty, light, and unbroken endurance, is finally understood. The story of the Yezidis is an unbroken chain of light, stretching from the dawn of civilization to this very moment. We began with a single peacock feather on sun-baked stone, a symbol that opened the door to one of humanity's most ancient and misunderstood faiths. We traced its possible roots back to the spiritual soil of Mesopotamia, long before the great monotheisms took shape, and saw how it grew into a unique and coherent system. At its heart, we met Tawusi Melek, the Peacock Angel, whose true story of loyalty was tragically twisted into a lie of devil worship, a lie that fueled centuries of persecution. We explored a cosmology of divine light emanating from a white pearl, administered by 7 mysteries, and reflected in a society structured by sacred castes. We witnessed the profound rituals at the valley of Lalish, where water is blessed by the Sinjar and the community reunites to renew its covenant with creation. We heard the living scripture in the hymns of the Kules and felt the weight of history in the 74 Firman, culminating in the horrific genocide of 2014. Through it all, a singular truth emerges: Yezidism is not a sect, a cult, or a historical relic. It is a distinct, rich, and complete spiritual tradition, a living faith with its own theology, practices, and sacred geography. Its survival through relentless attempts at erasure is nothing short of a miracle of the human spirit. It is a testament to the fierce will to preserve identity, to protect a unique understanding of the divine, and to maintain a covenant with the light, no matter how deep the darkness falls. This journey does not end here. If this story has moved you, let it be a beginning. Seek out the voices of Yezidi scholars, activists, and artists. Listen to their hymns, read their poetry shared with the world, and support their ongoing struggle for justice and homeland. Challenge the old stereotypes whenever you encounter them. In a world often quick to divide, let the Yezidi example remind us to hold space for the breathtaking diversity of human belief, to approach the unknown with curiosity rather than fear, and to recognize that every spiritual tradition is a universe of meaning, worthy of respect. Thank you for joining this deep dive into a hidden history. The conversation continues below. Share your reflections and subscribe for more journeys into the esoteric corners of our world.